UAPs, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military black projects, false flag alien invasion psyop, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join UFO historian Don Ecker, MUFON State Director for New York DePerno, retired veteran pilot Commander Cobra, and well-esteemed host and researcher Martin Willis as they discuss the latest news and topics regarding UAPs with a no-holds-barred approach on UAP Crossfire.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the premiere episode of Crossfire UAP. My name is Don Ecker. I'm previously the Director of Research for UFO Magazine, and since 1991, I have been a radio broadcaster that has basically zeroed in primarily on the UFO phenomenon. Now, our panel is an illustrious mix of various personalities throughout the UFO research field. We have Mr. Chris DePerno, a retired former New York police officer. We have Mr. Martin Willis, who has been in this fray for a very long time. And we have Commander Cobra, who is a military retired aviation pilot and military specialist. And basically, today, we're going to take a look at one of the most controversial aspects in current UFO research, and that is the topic of disclosure. Will it or will it not happen? Now, I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce our various panelists. Mr. Chris DePerno. Chris, take it away.
Hey, guys, I'm glad to be on this panel. Listen, I'm the skeptic of this group because I'm telling you, there's things that go on with disclosure that I think is fraud. I think there's money involved. I think there's black ops secrets that they're trying to keep from us. So I'm not sure you're ever going to see disclosure, because if you do, there might be people going to prison.
Mr. Martin Willis, please.
Well, I think we've had some sort of trickle in disclosure, in my opinion, like a sort of a nudge up to it. But anyone that's paid attention for a long time has seen, the setbacks and the misinformation. And, we get all primed up for what we think's going to happen. And then we realize, another Roswell slide situation or something like that. So I don't really know. I watched this great film from the 1950s where a guy that was old then said something along the lines, "I just can't wait for this whole thing to be disclosed." And that was back in the 1950s. And he just says, "I hope in my lifetime." And so a lot of us have had that. And I've heard the expression, the disclosure with a big D or a small d. And, maybe we've had some little bit of movement toward the small d, but I don't really know if we're actually moving forward or if it's just more disinformation, and I just don't know.
Commander Cobra.
Well, first, I want to say a great big thank you to Bill Skywatcher, who got us all together to bring this together, and KGRA for putting the show together. It's a great return. And I am honored to be with the three of you on this. I couldn't, in the expression in the flying world, I couldn't carry your helmet bags when it comes to this subject. I am the far out on the way out on the branch guy who looks at this kind of stuff and gives only the opinion based on life experience to it. Not a lot of really cool insider information on this particular part of UAP. I'm not able to sit in any of those kinds of groups, but I am pretty familiar with the process of what we see going on. So also a shout to the greatest audience on the planet. It's great to return to KGRA with such an esteemed group, and it's been a pleasure to do that. Gentlemen, I guess I'm in violent agreement with you. in that I do not think disclosure, as we would define it, because I think to each one of us, disclosure is a different personal thing. Like for each person, it's a different thing. I don't think we're ever going to have disclosure as we would define it come out. We may see a reveal, and we may see some resolution.
Okay, I guess I'll start this process off. For well over 20 years, I was the director of research for UFO magazine that was published here in Los Angeles, California. It was a publication begun by my wife in 1986 and her then business partner, Ms. Sherry Stark. I came on board in 1988. Now, I came with a background in investigation. I was a law enforcement officer, a police officer, and then a detective. And when I entered this, it was kind of in many ways a very tricky transition. On the one hand, investigations I know very well. On the other hand, it seemed at the time to be a very fringe topic, except I had a very dramatic encounter with the phenomenon. Now, in the early days, I was convinced that with just the right case, just the right witnesses, eventually, among others, the media would catch on. Oh my God, was I wrong? But the one prevailing item in this process has always been those who have been involved with it have looked for government disclosure on what they knew. Now, roughly the 35 years that I've been involved in this, I've learned a lot of things. And one of the things I learned, because I've dealt with them, I butted heads with the Department of Defense. I butted heads with NASA. I butted heads with practically every skeptic worth the name of skeptic in this country. And the one thing that I have learned is this, and it has recently been impressed on me once again. This has a core secret. The UFO topic has a core secret. And in recent years, it's been indicated, strong evidence, that this core secret is protected by an SAP, which means a special access program. We can get into the minutia later, but what that means is, unless you have a direct need to know, and that obviously would mean that you are in the process, the government process somewhere, you won't. Recently, we've discovered in the last couple of years that even a flag officer ranked director of the Defense Intelligence Agency tried to proceed down the path to find out exactly what does this government, the American government, and associated bureaucracies truly know about this subject. And purportedly, he was shut out of the process. This came from some very distinguished witnesses. Now, the bottom line is there is something happening that we are being forbidden from hearing from or experiencing or being told about. Gentlemen, please take it away. Commander, why don't you lead the charge?
Well, Don, you touched upon a number of points that are, I think, absolutely crucial to understanding our future debates on the show about events that go around us. So a special access program or even some higher level that's put on there, those are affixed by individuals involved in investigation or the control of the information that's there. So you have that there, and they're going to make decisions on who else can have it. it exists for a lot of important reasons, but often it also exists to protect faith in government process, faith in the institutions that purport protection or the ability for us as the society that we have here in the States to live. And it can go off the rails. And I think this is one of those areas where it's gone off the rails. It's to me, it comes down to two things. Either there's no doubt in my mind you're correct. There is some basic kernel of understanding, knowledge, unassailable fact that has led to this. It seems to be well cooperated by a number of world governments, regardless of their bend. So it's something that likens back to things that were talked about in previous movies, television shows, popular press. So there's no doubt about it to me that it exists. The next part is it's convenient. And if you have made mistakes, if you have fibbed, it's hard to keep track of that. And then what do you do when it's time to come clean? How do you come clean and not cause someone to go back and go, well, you knew this all this time, you didn't tell us. Why? There are studies like the RAND study. I remember talking about this with Martin a long time back, that the RAND study said that, things were going to collapse. World religions would lose their ability to have a moralistic code for people, because if it came out and was known, and they weren't saying if it did or didn't, they were just saying if it had become fact, that, one of those fun think tank kind of things that go on. Well, folks, I think we're at that point on the world stage that you could come out with anything. In fact, I believe that's why a lot of the things that we're seeing going on right now is just a sideshow to take us off the distraction of other events that are going on that have critical impacts on us. But driving back, the need to know is assigned by someone who decides who is going to be in that circle. And that circle is power, and power corrupts. Without any check and balance, power corrupts. And there is no check and balance with this. We have events in the past that just recently have come to light in the last decade or so. Nuclear armed bombers that had mishaps where we did not tell the citizens what had occurred during that event. For a lot of reasons. We didn't want to give up the fact of deficiencies that we had in our ability to carry out the mission for that we lose deterrence. So I think that's a good thing. There's people's lives on it, but there's also a lot of stuff that goes on around this where people do not want to be held accountable for making a mistake for whatever reason. I don't know why nowadays, because you make mistakes now and no one seems to get in trouble. No one has to ever resign. No one gets sent away. In fact, they get good deals, it seems like, out of it. They go to very interesting second and third careers. The F-35B that we just lost in South Carolina is a perfect example where I think in the back of all of this is going on is a group of people releasing information and watching how it moves around and how it spreads. It's crowdsourcing. It's a form of intelligence. Don, I think you know this better than most of us on the panel, how this works, where you put subjects out, and now, because of our proliferation of social media and the way we communicate, how we're doing this show, how we have, instantaneous communication going back and forth, that people watch to see where those trends are going. And I think they're concerned about trying to keep our attention on other things, not the things that are at hand that are dangerous. So, yep, there's good reasons that you have SAP. There's good reasons that you control information, especially folks that are way down on a pointy end of the stick. But sometimes way down on that pointy end of the stick are people doing things that are not in keeping with what most of the citizens in this country voted for, want. And most people want at least the honest truth to be thrown out. I personally have said this to you, all of you, directly in mass and other forums. I don't need the government to tell me what I believe on this subject, but I wouldn't mind some resolution and I wouldn't mind some clarity on it. I'm not one that could have my faith shaken in the process any more than it is right now. We're in a very weird time. And I don't like the way the subject is being used as a distraction to other things that are going on around us. But ultimately, back to your question, Don, yes, there is a root truth. There is a root foundational issue here, and it has been controlled from the beginning of its time because we have a group amongst us, self-appointed, that believes they know better than we do.
Chris?
Well,
Take it away.
There's a lot of things that Commander Cobra says that I would absolutely believe that is right on spot. First of all, I was a major crimes detective like you, Don. I was a detective, and I believe in following the evidence. That's the way I've always been built, especially with this subject. Show me the evidence before I make a determination. That's number one. Number two, I don't think disclosure is going to be anything because, first of all, 63% of the United States people believe in something flying around up there. They have our own different theories of what it is, but there's no question that they believe that in the universe somewhere there's other civilizations, and there's a good possibility they're visiting us either by time travel or by interdimensional, or they got bases under the water. Who knows? Because we haven't seriously looked at this. But I will tell you this, by looking at this subject of disclosure, I don't think it's going to come. I don't think it's going to come because I think what they did was take everything that they've learned about this and privatize it. I actually think it's been taken out of the government's hands in some respects to make it where people cannot get the answer. So you give it to Lockheed Martin, you give it to Boeing, you give it to these private companies, and they go, up yours. We're not going to give you squat. Why? Because they monetize it. Because they get billions, not millions, billions of our tax-paying dollars in order to research this. And they want that money coming back in. And so if they can pull that string as long as they can, they keep getting the money. And if you see what the new narrative is, they're not talking about, well, there might be civilizations and they could be good and they change it. Well, there's a threat in our airspace. These people could be threats. This is a threat. That's a threat. Here's a threat. So do I think that they are manipulating us? Absolutely. Commander Cobra is right on that. They want to see how we respond to the narratives. Now, I got to tell you that what made me believe that is because how do you lose an F-35 Lightning plane? How do you lose it? What the guy in the backyard go, hey, I think there's something crashed in my backyard.
We didn't lose that airplane. Chris, come on.
Of course not.
We didn't lose that airplane. That's ridiculous.
Of course not. Yeah, you know, we got some of the most sophisticated stuff going, and God only knows what we do have that they're not telling us. So they put out, just like you said, they do put out narratives to see how the public reacts. Why? Because there's a bigger agenda. The UFO field is a small part of the agenda of what they really want to do to encompass us, to maneuver us. And we as people are being maneuvered. I mean, it's plain and day. Police departments used to do it. Don, you know as well as I do, if we wanted to find a killer or something like this, we would put out false information. We would work the narrative, to the public, so the public kind of got an idea of where we're going with this. So
or even notify the suspect that he won a large cash award. All you got to do is come by and pick it up.
All the time we put out stuff that was to benefit us in order to get our goal. The government's no different. They're doing the same thing. Look, I will tell you this, and I was taught by a good old timer. He says, Chris, anytime they're showing you the right hand, you better be watching the left hand, because that's where the real deal is. And that's no different from the government. They have special access projects going on that we will never see. Why? Because they want to weaponize it, monetize it, and be able to make it for them. The second thing is money, money, money. Anytime you see white crime, white criminals, and stuff like that, as far as money, money, money goes, the white crime is amazing. You're not talking millions, you're talking billions of dollars being sold. Remember, Rumsfeld said one time, we lost billions of dollars and we don't know where it is. How do you lose billions of dollars in the Department of Defense?
I just want to note that occurred the night before Desert Storm kicked off. I just want to throw that in.
Yeah. But he goes public before Desert Storm and he says, hey, folks, we lost billions of dollars like you lost a $5 bill somewhere in the house. Come on, folks. This is a bunch of hooey, and they're just going to manipulate us until we say enough. End of peace.
Martin, please take it away.
Well, one of the things I spoke with Chris Mellon when the very first got an interest in this topic, and one of the questions I asked him was, could a president find out what exactly is going on? And he said to me that if that person or whoever it was he was addressing, organization or whatever, actually knew, that they would have to say it. But so I always thought this had to be very compartmentalized and privatized, as you all are saying. I think there's a lot to that. But I guess I would have to toss this out to anyone that wants to answer, debate it, whatever. Does anyone actually think that there is a part of the government somewhere that actually knows what's going on? I personally think they probably do not really know exactly what it is. Maybe they'd have evidence to know what it is, but maybe they can't figure it out. I think it's a possibility, and I just wanted to toss that out there. If anyone else wants to talk, address that. Do you think they actually know what is going on?
Well, Mark, I want to jump in.
I've spent.
Everybody wants to jump in on that one, Martin.
I spent the last several years thinking about what possibly could this core secret be. Okay? This has been something that's been on my plate, literally, if you get right down to it, back to the very beginnings of when my wife and I were publishing UFO magazine. And over those years, I've been suffused with a lot of people's theories of what it could be. For example, Roswell. One of the secrets of Roswell, this is what I was told. Do I believe it? I don't know. But human bodies were discovered in the crash wreckage. I heard that. I heard that there were secret testings going on human beings by these purported ETs. I've heard other things. At one point, believe it or not, there was a contingent within the UFO research field that believed that one group of ETs, and if we're being visited by one, ladies and gentlemen, believe me, there's more than just one group that have dropped by for a visit. I had people telling me that they were utilizing human beings for sustenance. In other words, we were being cannibalized by certain groups of ETs. I've heard that over those years, there have been a number of different types of groups. For example, there's a group that comes by that are very kindly disposed toward the human race. I've heard other groups that have come by for scientific curiosity, and they're basically benign, but they don't care one way or the other. And then I've heard, and this incidentally came from somebody that basically would have been in the know, that there is a group of ETs that came by that are basically still in the vicinity that have an inimical hatred for the human race. And it's because we have all, in one degree or another, a psychic ability or talent which they regard as a threat. Now, with that being said, I've just yesterday, as we do this show, completed a paper that I basically began a number of months ago on this very thing, disclosure, and what my ultimate decision has been about what is truly happening. It's currently being in the proofing process. I'm going to be releasing it hopefully very soon. But one of the things that I came to the conclusion of why there is this secret is this. in near-Earth space, not just now, but for a very long time, there has been an ongoing conflict. You know, back in July of 2023, when Congress was holding its UFO UAP hearings, there was a witness that came forward, a former military officer that was involved in intelligence matters and operations by the name of David Grosh. And Grosh made a statement that stuck with me for a long time. And that statement was that there have been at least a dozen, perhaps more, of these off-world vehicles that have been picked up by military authorities and others. Now, I thought about that. My God, if any of those craft are extraterrestrial, which means they came from a different star system, we're talking about light years away from planet Earth. Does it make sense that those technological marvels could come from another star system all the way to Earth and then suddenly crash? Didn't make sense. I would have to believe that their maintenance people are some of the best available anywhere in the universe to keep these things flying. No, but I'll tell you what does make sense. I'm a combat veteran from Vietnam, okay? I did 2 tours in Southeast Asia. And one thing I saw a lot of were aircraft that were shot down. Shot down, okay? Blown out of the sky. This made more sense to me if what Grosh said is correct, is true, that these things are being shot down. Now, what would that mean? That would mean that there are at least 2 groups out there that have a problem with each other. And that problem is being brought to Earth. Now, most of us, let's face it, the large majority of the world, 99.9% of everybody on the planet probably would think that's something from a science fiction movie. But what if it's not? Okay. Now, I was personal friends with Mr. Ingo Swann. Ingo Swann was the man that designed the protocols for the Stargate remote viewing project. This, incidentally, is a large part of what I talk about in my paper. And Swann, in 1975, was directed by unknown intelligence people to perform a remote viewing session that basically took place on the moon. Swann, he told me this in person, as well as putting it in his book, Penetration, that he discovered on the far side of the moon that never faces Earth, what appeared to be an extraterrestrial base. And while he was remotely viewing this base, they detected him, which obviously would mean they have a tremendous psychic talent also. And Swann said they were not happy about this. They are not friendly, and they became quite angry when they detected me viewing them. So the bottom line is we don't truly know what we don't know, but I do believe that there are certain individuals in government that in fact do have a fair handle on what is going on, and they are terrified to their eyebrows that this information may hit the public. Gentlemen, take it away.
Well, first of all, Don, the jury's still out with Grush with me, because I'll tell you the reason why. Because he may be a patriot, he may be a great whistleblower, but here's what I heard from him. There's 2 things that really stuck with me. One, he said, well, I heard it from this guy, and I heard it from that guy, and I saw this paper here, but I don't have it, and I saw this paper here, but I don't have it, and I got this picture here, but I don't have it, and this guy told me about this, but he's not coming forward. And the other thing about Woodrush is that when he was asked about Roswell, and this really stuck in my mind, he said, "I'm not authorized to talk about it." Now, if you're a whistleblower and you want to put this out there, Roswell is the biggest thing going because most people believe in Roswell. Most people believe that something crashed there or got shot down there, which I tend to believe it was more shot down than a crash. Because if you're coming light years to here, you're not going to get a flat tire or an oil engine knock or something like that. You know, you got a sophisticated enough equipment, you're not really going to crash. Maybe I'm wrong. But he says, I'm not authorized to talk about that. Which means is he was briefed and said, you need to stay away from this. You need to stay away from this. You can go in this direction. You can go in this direction. That's manipulation. That's number one. Number two, I mean, as far as them eating us, I'm going on a diet tomorrow because I look like wushu beef, that Japanese beef. So if I could take some marble off of me, maybe they'll leave me alone.
Incidentally, that was from the original John Lear paper back in '88.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I mean, if they looked at us as cattle, Don, I think by now we would have seen them come down and herd a whole lot of us in. I mean, they don't care. They're 45,000 years more advanced than us. What they could care less if we get frightened or not. I mean, when you step on an ant pile, do you really care if the ants are frightened?
Commander, you started to say something. You're muted. There you are.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to jump in. I want to answer your question. So, yes, I think that ultimately there are some folks that know, but on the inside of military and government ops, I have been in the room. I've been out in the field. I've been working alongside, very covert surveillance operations, only to bump into somebody else who was targeted to the same operation that I was, completely different source of money, completely different source of control, communications. And not always was it done to have redundancy or depth to cover for a successful mission. Sometimes it was done because the people at the top calling the shots retire, die, go away, forget. They have other intrigues that go on. So John, Martin, going back to your earlier question, I really think that there are plenty of opportunities here for people to set things into motion, go away, and you have redundancy. You have people toiling in one area that aren't aware of people doing something the same or similar in another. That's the nature of our bureaucratic relationship. It happens everywhere.
Commander, I'd just like to, and I apologize for interrupting, but you hit a point with me. So what you're saying is basically we have two separate groups doing the same project.
Chris, I'd be happy if it was down to two.
So what a waste of money. So you got to imagine what kind of power fraud there's with that.
Right. No argument there. I want to get off I completely am on board with the money aspect of this. But getting back to Martin's question, Don, you made a remark talking about shoot downs. So if you look at the difference of something like the Afghanistan invasion by the then Soviet Union, very, very sophisticated aircraft, very, very sophisticated military, regardless of the fact, good or bad or otherwise, set that aside, they were very capable. And they went against a group of highly motivated, very motivated folks that did not have, especially in the beginning, the types of technology and never really attained the types of technology that would put them on a one-to-one footing. And they were highly successful at physically knocking down all kinds of aircraft because they used very basic kinetic weapons that they had. They used certain things. Now, I am going to disagree with you, gentlemen, because with over 15,000 hours flying different types of air-breathing vehicles, nothing anti-gravity, I wish. Nothing that has hyperdrive, I double wish. Things do go wrong. And there are options often that go on that you would send a vehicle that does not have the means to return or has a very slight means to return if the furthering of a goal or a mission was worthy of doing that. We had talks in this country in the late 50s and early 60s about putting a man on the moon that could not leave the moon, with the hopes that within a year we could make a vehicle to go back and get him, because we had to take possession of the moon before other countries did. I don't think that other races of people that exist in this universe may be altruistic or any more altruistic than we are. They may be more advanced. They may be more enlightened. If you look at the family of man, you have folks that are extremely sophisticated, have an unbelievably wonderful conscience. They give up everything and they live in near poverty. You have other folks that will do anything to acquire power. I'm talking about different countries, different groups of people that we see on the face of the earth. I would imagine that a similar kind of array would occur in our galaxy, if not the entire universe. I go back to the expression. I don't need to be confirmed in my belief. It would be nice to finally get the truth, because I like truth. I like when truth comes out, because aside from the shock factor, you kind of know where you stand and you go forward with this. But to answer your question, Don, and to answer your question to start this, Martin, yes, I think that shoot down is a very capable thing. Sorry, gentlemen, I think these things could malfunction pretty easily, especially if they had to do something extraordinary to make the travel possible in a reasonable, or what we would call a time constraint, which is a constraint that we design. Time is something that we do not have a good handle on. It's something that we have created, as well as the nature of business and being confused and having other people working at the same time on the same goal, certain groups of people going away, rediscovering something that was already discovered, not uncommon, not at least in my experience, on a much smaller scale, obviously, than this.
Well, I'll jump in here and just thank you for that. Everyone, thank you for that. And, you know, a lot of times when I talk about this subject, I always have to back up and say, okay, I'm thinking on human terms, but we have no idea what we're encountering and what they would do or not do. And so perhaps there's, you know, perhaps Roswell was some type of interference they didn't expect from lightning or whatever. You know, I mean, it's really hard to grasp. But Don, you mentioned about the possibility of you know, being shot at and knocked down that way. And I had this. I'm going to see if I can pull that up. I don't even know if I can. No, can't do it. I tried to do a screenshot. So I had Jonathan Wagner on a while ago as a guest on my show, and he's only talked about the situation twice. He was in Peru in 1997, and let's see. Okay, I was just told by Bill in the back room that he can share the screen. Let me just see if I can do that again. And I think the image is totally gone, so it doesn't matter. So sorry about that. Anyway, the situation was that when he came up to this craft, the first thing that he thought in Peru was that it was hit by a Hawk missile, a kinetic type of situation. You mentioned, Commander, I believe they're kinetic. And anyway, with the damage, he's looked at other craft and says that it was similar. So he thought that this particular thing that embedded itself into a cliff with all this weird liquid coming out that was changing color, stuff like that. He believes that thing was actually hit and taken down. And when I asked him, I said, this thing in the middle of the jungle, wedged into a cliff, it seems like it would be something impossible to retrieve, because there were a couple of Chinooks or whatever they were came in with these guys in black camo. And there's another Marine that was talking about a similar situation later. Jonathan's talked about this since it happened in 1997. Again, he's only talked about it twice, but he was saying that these people came in And I asked him, I said, what about rescuing the craft? It seems in the middle of the jungle, wedged into the cliff. And he says his speculation on it was they weren't interested in the craft. They were interested in what was inside the craft. So I thought that was an interesting.
Well, I have basically come down on the fact that very close to Earth, and perhaps even on Earth, because back when my wife and I were doing UFO Magazine, we had one of our correspondents originally came from the Ukraine when it was still under the Soviet Union. And this individual, Paul Stonehill was his name, did a lot of worldwide reporting on primarily the UFO situation. And he came out with several stories that we ended up publishing involving what appeared to be, to the witnesses that saw this, conflict in the skies, primarily in Siberia, literally shootouts between various groups of unidentified flying craft. Now, there was another situation that Stonehill also reported on, where a group of Russian, Soviet UDT specialists, underwater demolition people, were at Lake Baikal in the former Soviet Union, doing some type of operation or mission there, when they encountered humanoid beings beneath the surface of the lake. One of the Russians foolishly attempted to capture one of those people. This story today is fairly well known. And these unknown humanoids basically ended up attacking the Russians, killing several, causing several to surface prematurely, where they suffered the bends, and basically showed hostility. Now, perhaps it was only self-defense, only God knows, I don't. But the bottom line was that some of these face-to-face encounters have not been good. Now, with that being said, getting back to the conflict aspect of this, in 1991 in November, I broke a major story on Larry King Live involving a Soviet probe, Phobos 2, that was sent to Mars, launched in July of 1988, arrived in Mars orbit, began performing its experiment. At the time, it was not known here in the West that NASA was a very integral part of this mission. It was not announced then. But during this mission, at the time, Glavkosmos, the Soviet-Russian space agency, and NASA were contemplating the possibility of a joint manned mission to Mars. And at that time, 87, 88, 89, the time frame they were looking at was 2015. Well, make a long story short, this probe was photographing Mars, was photographing the Martian moon Phobos, when it took a photograph of a stupendously huge thing, object, whatever it was, a long cylindrical cigar-shaped craft, that then, according to Glavkosmos, turned toward their probe, ramming it. Basically, they destroyed it. And later, a few months later, I broke another story, originally on NBC, then on CNN, on once again Larry King Live, of a space shuttle mission, STS-48, that clearly showed, and I thought this would be the smoking gun, clearly showed an unknown object, a UFO, rising above the limb of the Earth. And then a few seconds later, on this live video that NASA had streamed down, this was from a live video, there was a brilliant flash of light that appeared to be behind the space shuttle, and then something streaked directly at this UFO. The UFO took a violent evasive maneuver to get out of the way, and then came circling back. Now, no matter how you cut it, that was some type of hostile action. I don't think that anything has changed much in those 30 odd plus years. Commander?
So why would NASA have that allowed to be photographed?
Well, obviously they didn't know about it. At the time, they would send live feeds.
Right.
back to
I
Earth
understand that.
during
I understand the premise of the live feed, Decker. My point is, you're saying we were the witness between two different groups in near Earth orbit that were taking shots at each other.
Well, I have no way of absolutely knowing. That's speculation. But somebody took a shot.
I think that NASA does some things. My favorite one was the more recent STS when they were out on their spacewalk and the astronaut's hand just happened to come in front of the lens at a very interesting time and then came back up. And again, I think sometimes they may be blocking from view vehicles and things they don't want us to see. I tend to think that they're probably terrestrial. I think they tend to be something that they're trying to not show how we're doing something in space. The International Space Station is an interesting effort because everybody would have to agree to what is going on there. I don't have any hard feelings one way or the other. A lot of the things that I have seen attributed to this rival group, it makes me wonder if that is the premise behind why disclosing is so uncomfortable for world governments to make the announcement, because of agreements, treaties, whatever word you want to use that are made. Chris, going back to your remark and earlier trailing back to Decker about as a food source. Well, I mean, if gathering people up is going to be a problem, gathering up a small number and then using them for ranching, for lack of a better term, makes a lot of sense. It's a lot easier to transport back a small group and then use that for breeding stock. I mean, if we are dealing with a superior intellect, I would imagine that bringing up large numbers might cause a problem. Do I think that we would easily, going back to the premise of many of the great shows of 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, that folks would line up in our different governmental organs to sign up others for such an adventure? Sure. I'll go all the way back to Rod Sterling, To Serve Man. There's a lot of life lesson, no pun intended, in that little show, in that particular episode. It would explain a lot of other activities that are going on.
Well, let me ask you this, Commander. I'm going to ask this to the entire group. Here's my question. Do you believe we have the technology that we reverse engineered, like Bob Lazar says, Michael Schratz has alluded to it, Space Force out there? Do you believe we have this anti-gravity technology that we can make crafts similar to what has been visiting us?
Okay.
Well, before anybody answers that, let me just make a brief observation. When I got into this field, the one thing that I did was research the history of UFO research going back to the 1940s. Donald Kehoe, whom I consider to be the dean of the original research specialist, made a notation in one of his books that about 1957, 58, one of the original Nazi rocket scientist James Oberth had been brought over here during Operation Paperclip. And in his last public address to the American press, before he went totally incommunicado, was the fact that he said they were working on gravity technology and things were coming along nicely. Then pure absolute black. Nothing further came out about that. So if you take Oberth at his word, and he was one of the premier Nazi rocket scientists, if you take him at his word, we have been on that path for at least 60 plus years.
Okay. Commander, do you agree with that? Do we have that technology?
To give you the simple answer, like if you had pulled me over, yes, officer.
There you go. Martin, do you believe we have that technology?
I think it's very possible, and it would certainly explain a number of situations that people report.
And Don, obviously you believe in that we have that technology, right?
I have talked. I have a personal friend who is a physicist, and basically I've had a number of conversations with him about several aspects of this. Number one, I asked him, do you think that we currently have an ultra top secret black space force currently in operation? He thought it was highly probable. And how far along are we really technologically? And he said, well, anything that you see flying today, probably you can add about 50 years of additional technology to it that we don't know about. So I would have to say, yeah, I would not be surprised, Chris, at all.
So with that in mind, because we all agree that the technology, some of these things that may be shooting down may be earthly made, maybe Chinese, maybe Russian. Because remember, Commander Cobra, one of the things was stuck in my mind, and after thinking about what you said, you talked about the Tic Tacs and the possibility those Tic Tacs may have been ours. When Fravor was flying and he was talking about how they were moving and such things, that stuck in my mind. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, if we're that advanced with technology, that could be our stuff. That could be the Chinese. That could be the Russians. You can't leave them out. You know, and there's a possibility that we're still in a Cold War and we're both shooting down our stuff. What do you think?
No doubt in my mind that the Tic Tac is U.S. technology. By the way it was flown, how it interacted, what went on, how it was revealed. I believe it was also a manned asset. People say, well, there's no way that an occupant could survive those G-forces, because what we do, it's part of the discussion that we've had here today. We base on something that we see and say, okay, by our standards, by our experience, this is what it would take for a vehicle to do this. There's a really interesting thing in the world of electronics, and it's been extrapolated that if the transistor never came along, how would have technology been affected by that? You would, if you didn't weren't it had the ability. Now, you talked about the Russians. The then Soviets could put a much larger payload into space. And because of their larger payload, they didn't have to worry about micro anything. They were able to put large amounts into space, and that's what they did, because getting the foothold was more important than having technology. So now we're in the catch-up mode, but we can't put as much payload up. So we now are forced to figure out ways to miniaturize and to make lighter, or to put more in the same amount of weight in that capacity. That kind of impact is how I think you need to look at all these arguments. Obviously, it's not a drive system of anything like it. It's not an air-breathing vehicle. It uses something that you're using a gravitational control on, in my mind. But to me, the next question you usually get, okay, if you think that, and the power source, why aren't we seeing more of it? Because it's so probably prohibitively expensive so absolutely demanding in what we're doing, and competing with lots of other activities that are going on in a economy of the world, economy of a country, that I think there's a very strong possibility that it's hard to make this past anything more than a few flying articles, especially if it's anything that's been re-engineered or is using adaptive technology, where we brought that out. And that comes up all the time. The other part is, if you're correct, and I think you are, that there are other countries with like kind of capabilities and games. You also have this game where you can't disturb the table too much. That makes the other group, who has the ability to put a fairly bad annihilation out, feel that they're going to lose, or they are going to have to succumb to that. So I think, rightly or wrongly, a lot of the gamesmanship that is played here is, how do you do? I remember that in the 80s or 90s, there was a study where they were concerned, because of the then refrigerant, that if too many people in the world all went and got refrigerators, which would be fantastic, right? It would change the way the lives of many, many people. It was going to put too much of a strain on the atmosphere because of the type of coolant we were using at that time, concerns about ozone, the belief that this was going to cause it, how it was going to be milled and mined, and all those things were going to happen. So there were groups of people, studies, think tanks that sat there advising the political leadership of the world why they shouldn't allow this to happen now, because the technology hadn't been cured to that point. Those kinds of decisions, I think, are there. I think that it affects this topic. I'm not one that believes that we have a highly super capable space capability under Space Force or other activities. I'm not convinced on that one. I'd like to, but I'm not convinced on that one.
Martin.
Okay, gentlemen, we've got less than 1 minute before we've got to go to break. With that being said, I would like to kind of slide over into a little bit of a different lane temporarily, only temporarily. But what you said about refrigeration, Commander, is very interesting, because we can also use that argument today concerning electric vehicles. Not only do we need massive amounts of lithium, if in fact we're going to go that direction, but we also need the infrastructure in order to charge those vehicles, which currently today I think we are sorely lacking. Chew on that for a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with a whole lot more. Stick around. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with, oh my heaven, Commander Cobra, you look different. What's the deal there, Commander?
Well, this is...
Are you getting ready to take off or what?
We started talking about food sources, and this is a link back to Martin's incredible audience, their raw meat kind of reaction to when many years ago, when Martin was so kind to have me on his show as a guest. My appearance, which was somewhat similar to how I am dressed right now, set them all a tither. Talk about anti-gravity. They were generating so much power within the chat rooms. I think it was melting down cloud servers all over the United States and the world. And then I decided to play along with the kittens and just rolled right in. So I want you to know that I'm completely serious. You always wear sunglasses under the dark visor when you're ready to go. That's the game. Okay. You always have to be ready to go.
Well, I changed headgear also. So
well, a two-time runner at Southeast Asia, and now you have the Desert Storm hat on there. I think that's very appropriate.
Okay. Well, guys, when we went to break, I kind of threw some raw meat out there. There's a tremendous push right now for everyone ultimately to convert their gasoline-driven internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. Now, on the one hand, I kind of understand that. A little bit. Maybe this much. On the other hand, and this is just a personal rant of mine, but human hubris never ceases to astound me.
Nope.
And what I mean by that is this planet is approximately, best guesstimate, 4.5 billion with a B years old. Human race has been here, well, I'll give it a stretch. Let's say a few 100,000 years, maybe 500,000 years. There is some argument that we may go back even further, but I don't know. But in industry and our great technological leap forward is only about 200 and odd years along since we became the beginnings of industrialized. Here we are, a little over 200 years later, worried that the human race may destroy the planet. Now, with that being said, what has this planet gone through in those 4.5 billion years? We've gone through numerous ice ages. We've gone through numerous cosmic impacts, everything from meteorites to comets to asteroids pummeling the planet. And we today are worried about the internal combustion engine and plastic bags and plastic straws. I'm here in California, and we think we are going to destroy the planet because of a few plastic grocery bags. I mean, the hubris it knocks me on my socks. Gentlemen, please.
Well, I was hoping we would stick more to the UFO topic when I took on this show, to be honest with you. But I'll just
say, Martin, is simply an aside. We were talking about technology, and hey, this is our show. If we want to take an aside, we can take an aside.
Martin, I think though you are correct, but I think that there's a pretty good tie-in when the wheel comes around to me here that might assuage you a little bit on this. Why this has kind of a fit. But please, you were getting ready to say something. Go ahead.
Well, I think we can affect. I understand you're saying what we've been through, but I do believe that we can affect things. I'm not so sure that electric vehicles are an answer because it takes a big stretch to get there. But I do think that we can make an impact. And yes, the Earth is resilient. It can be resilient and without us here also. And, I just think that we're not doing us any favors with how we treat things. And the plastic you mentioned, that's just one thing. We're just very selfish and in the moment. That's how I feel about how we are. And think about, nuclear power, nuclear waste, how we have to guard it for, a couple 100,000 years. We don't even know what 200,000 years in the past was, never mind have to worry about babysitting stuff that we create for our selfishness for a short period of time. There, I've done my rant and off the topic of UFOs. So go ahead, Commander.
Yeah, go ahead,
Chris?
Commander.
Well, no, I'm going to sound a little bit like a socialist when I say this. I think the number one goal that we should have had as a group would have been the ability to produce electricity freely. I think that should have been a commodity like air, that we should have produced enough electrical power, since it is probably the most critical form of energy that we use as a civilization. So with that said, this approach that we're taking on this particular part, I think does have kind of a parallel to what we're talking about in the UFO world. We're not getting good information. We're being led by very, very strange events that go forward on this. Right now, we're saying that we want to produce a vehicle that actually causes, you're worried about nuke material, Martin. the materials that we are putting together in these vehicles will require almost longer periods of time, so that when they are no longer used in the batteries, is what I'm referring to, have to be custodially cared for in means greater than what we have right now for nuclear power. So we are going to destroy the earth to save the earth kind of thing never has made much sense to me. The other part, obviously, I will now flash onto the other side of it, that it seems to me that it's not consistent with any kind of scientific approach or engineering approach. I don't think we should be using plastic bags in supermarkets. Oil and its production and the different things we have should be prioritized to what you need. You need lubricants, you need plastics for medicine. The convenience of plastic bags, I'm sorry, I just don't care. It seems rather silly to me that you would waste it on one-time thing. All the things that we do that aren't consistent with having a smart measure to go forward. And I am completely in Martin's camp that there is nothing that we do that says to me we are good stewards of what we've been given on this planet and what we go forward with that. But my ultimate feeling is there's no plan to make this transition. What's driving these discussions? Well, if you talk about what Chris is saying, it's the latest thing to monetize. It's the latest thing to make money. It's the latest thing to control the population that we're able to do this. We will no longer travel the distances that we have taken for granted that we will travel if we make this transition to electrical vehicles. It's just not going to occur. There's no possible way when in the preceding decades, we have not done to the grid what we should have been doing. We're losing 35 to 48% of the electricity that we pump into the system. I am a believer that there is new technology, because I've seen it work on ships, that would radically change how we do it by putting small reactors that are in the ground that do not cause the kinds of things that we have seen happen go wrong with big reactors. And we have close to 80 years of technology doing this efficiently with very few accidents, with very few control issues that go on. So there has to be something above all this that's driving it. And that's where I see the parallels with the kinds of things that we're talking about with the UAP Crossfire, because we're being thrown things to further cause us to fragment, further cause us to go into smaller, balkanized groups, getting at each other's throats would make it easier for folks that are self-appointed to run this. And ultimately, I will go one step further. As crazy as I sound on this one, this is just another thing to keep us from talking about the phenomena that is going on around us. This is one more thing to break down dialogue by causing us to have another fight on the corner when we should be looking 2 or 3 blocks down the road. Gentlemen?
Wow. Well, I want to chime in here. First of all, Martin, I want to get back a little bit on the UFO with this type of discussion. One, I believe there's been many civilizations on this earth besides us that probably had very advanced technology. I mean, I don't think that we're the king of this this earth, this planet, as far as that goes. And I believe that we've discovered those technologies, and some of those technologies would take us out of the oil-based phenomenon that we're in now. However, I got to agree with Commander that it's money. If I have, look at it, back in the 70s, guys, remember when they came out with all these new carburetors where gas was going to, I mean, you were going to go from 9 miles to the gallon to 35 miles to the gallon, to 50 miles, to 60 miles a gallon. And what did they do? They bought off that technology and they locked it in a safe. And I think the same thing is happening with oil companies today and other people who want that technology and say, whoa, wait a minute. We're going to give you $50 million and we'll take that technology. If everybody in this panel agrees that we can reverse anti-gravity, we've got the technology to harness safe energy. There's no question in my mind, but it's locked up because people are making money. And I've just seen so much corruption in the world being a police officer, being a detective, that I know people will pay for that stuff to hide it. And so they can just drab us with this stuff in order for us to do it. So going back to our technology, I believe we have it, Commander. I believe that it's locked up, and we're not going to see it until they got their pennies worth out of it.
Well, that's pretty definitive. And gentlemen, I got to say, I agree basically with every one of you. Out here currently in California, the price of gasoline was just incidentally raised again, and we're paying well over $5 a gallon. So when you talk about value for your dollar, and considering what the price of gasoline was just 2.5, 3 years ago, it's astounding. But to get back to the UFO UAP, and there's something, gentlemen, that I'd like to get your feelings about. This constant changing of the name of the phenomenon. Back in Kehoe's day, when he first started taking a look at this, they were flying discs, flying saucers. The United States Air Force then came out with the moniker UFO, unidentified flying objects. That seemed to be good for a long time. And suddenly, once again, it's changed to UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Martin, what do you attribute that to?
Well, they've also, now it's unidentified, isn't it anomalous? They changed it again,
Yeah.
the acronym. So this is a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. My show is called Podcast UFO. I started it back when the UFO word was cool. But in 2013, I was in a conference in North Carolina, and I met Dr. Richard Haynes. And I said, Dr. Haynes, I would love to have you on my show. And we got into a conversation, and he said, oh, your show's called Podcast UFO? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I really can't come on there. He says, because we use the term UAP, and UFO has a bad rap. People think of little green men and all that. And so I was like, oh my God. And then later on, I saw someone else, with something in UFO or whatever.
And you didn't look at him and say, Dick, are you shitting me?
But anyway,
that kind of je ne sais quoi, Martin.
Yeah.
You have to get up early to have Decker's je ne sais quoi in that kind of a situation.
Well, so it was, and I thought, what is it? And I talked to Leslie Kane about it, and she said, at that time I talked to her, and she said, yeah, we're just, we are just like, she was part of this UAP movement. Yeah. For me to go to Washington and talk about it, we really have to separate that flying saucer UFO mentality to bring it over to unidentified aerial phenomenon. That was in 2013. So the switch has been going on for a while now, but as I mentioned, they did just change that. But I mean, what happens? Someone will say to me, what does UAP mean? A UFO. It doesn't really go too far. Then the word comes back to it's unidentified. That's, I don't think it should be a bad
Martin,
word.
Control the language, control the people. I don't mean to, go too big onto the conspiracy, and it's a Japanese rising sun do-rag, not the tinfoil. The tinfoil's underneath. You can't see it. But this is a perfect microcosm of what we're all experiencing. I say going against, but what we're experiencing. We keep changing words, but we're not getting down to the discussion. I'm sure that there's when you put a level of some kind of respectability, that if you're a government agency or a military agency investigating this kind of phenomena, Well, that sounds a lot better than saying UFOs. I mean, you saw it in the congressional hearings. You had senators and congressmen that were acting like asses with the kind of remarks of well, are you talking about these beings, were they like the little green men? You watch it when there's certain news.
No,
Now,
Commander, no. They're biologicals today.
Again, change the words, control the conversation, control the people. I get it. It seems pretty obvious to me. My anger flares up with this up until probably 3-4 years ago. Every time you saw a network news, especially from the local affiliate, that was covering anything that went on with it, there would always be some laughter on the set. There would always be some joke, and there would be the little green man kind of thing going on. Now, since we had the New England UFO show, and I got from Sue the inflatable alien, which I have kept in my car now for years, and he moves around with me. He makes deliveries with me. He's on the hay pickups. I use that as a means to have a conversation with a lot of different folks about what's going on and what the experience is. So instead of embracing it, if you shift it over, look what you just went through, Martin. You were delegitimized because you're using the term UFO, the acronym, UFO. Because right now it's UAP, and soon it's going to be something else because you're dated, you're not hip, you're not current, you're not talking about the newest stuff. And it's the same BS coming out of the same people that are doing it. And this is nothing new to what it was. I've watched weapons technology go through it. We have books of acronyms that we have to differentiate. The same acronym covers 5 or 6 different things. Some of them are a weapon, others are an agency, some are things that you're conducting, how you would do an investigation, and it has an acronym that's the same. That's how crazy this is. Because if you can throw this terminology, you confer a certain level of, in I think most people's their own minds, legitimacy, respect, or the big A word, authority. I laugh at all of this. This is all nonsense that we're arguing over where we're going to sit at the table and not what the meal is. And that's how this has gone on for ages.
I agree with you, Commander. I think you're sitting at an empty table because if you take the UFO and UAP, and I agree with everything you said, if you control the narrative, you're controlling the people, but also you're diversing it out where people don't get into the meat of the product. And I'll go back to those congressional hearings, which I thought were farces, because I watched a head of the Naval Intelligence say we don't have a good laptop or computer to make a still shot of this thing. They showed a picture there. You are the U.S. government. You're the head of Naval Intelligence. You're supposed to have the most sophisticated stuff, satellites in the sky that can see license plates, and you're telling me you don't bring to a congressional hearing?
And you don't go and get a sketch artist to make a rendition of it that you can show on the whiteboard. I mean,
I almost pissed my pants when he said that. I was
and the
laughing
part you got to
so hard.
love best is they're saying that with a straight face, and you have to believe it.
Gentlemen,
I don't.
Here's a just a little thing to show how correct you absolutely are. In my paper, and once it's completed and you read it, you're going to notice that I talked a bit about the Clementine mission. Okay. In January 1994, NASA and the Department of Defense Ballistic Missile Agency, BMOD, went back to the moon and completely rephotographed and remapped the lunar surface. Now, this was 22 freaking years after the end of Apollo, which was Apollo 17, December 1972. They took with them the KH-11 spy satellite, okay, or the equivalency thereof, a device that can sit thousands of miles in orbit and can photograph a package of cigarettes where you can read the Surgeon General's warning on the pack. And they took in excess of 2.5 million photographs. Now, to prove my point, I went searching for any photographs that were released from that mission, Clementine. And literally, there's only a handful that the DoD and NASA ever released, and they're all blurry, deresonized, and blurry to the extreme. And they want the American public to believe that's the best they could do. Pure dog and pony sex show. That's all it is. Okay. And that's basically everything today, is that dog and pony sex show and smoke and mirrors. And my question is, when the hell are we going to have had enough? My problem has always been, you guys have been talking about that dinner table, talking about where everybody's going to sit. Well, I never even get an invite because I have a propensity for calling a spade a fucking shovel. Okay? And people today hate that straight talk.
Well, Don, the other part about that dinner,
yeah,
one of the reasons that we're not getting to the meal is because they came out with the bill before we even ordered. Okay, that's another thing that's slowing us all up. We're seeing money thrown on these things, and you're not getting to the main event. Martin, you look like you were ready to leap there.
Yeah, go ahead.
No? Oh, did you have something good?
I wanted
Chris?
to ask Martin a question. Martin, you were at the hearings. When you saw some of the stuff that they were saying there, I mean, didn't you cock your head and go, what the hell is going on with these guys?
Are you talking about the witnesses?
I'm talking about you were there where they had the U.S. Naval Intelligence Director and the Undersecretary of State, correct?
I was there when Grush was there.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
I didn't catch that, but I getting back to what, you both said about, the video and the it was ridiculous, because if that's not the best they have. And they were just making a point, I think, just to dismiss, the window dressing stuff and to just say, or I like when James Fox went ballistic the other day on, who was it? I forget who it was. One of the skeptics, Michael Shermer. And Michael Shermer started going on about how this looked like this, but then it ended up being explained. And Fox just interrupted him and he says, we don't want to hear about the ones that are explained, which is so true.
Exactly.
It's such a good point. We want to know about the ones that aren't.
Getting back to the
that's what they did try to steer it that way. Well, we have an explanation for this and this and this. They kind of, it just kind of muddies the whole thing.
Well, I mean, one of them out and out lied, because Travis Taylor turned around and says that triangle that they saw in the sky, they said, well, that's a drone. I mean, we took it to analysis and they analyzed it. And after several months, they just said it's a drone. So your most sophisticated battleship that you have couldn't tell, with all the radar and everything that they have, couldn't tell that was a drone flying in the sky? We're in bad shape if that's actually happened, which I believe is a lie. I mean, obviously, they come up with this crazy story. But also, getting back to your UFO and UAP narrative, notice how the organizations are changing their name. First, they were Blue Book. And then we discover years later that we got ATIP. Now it's went to Arrow. And now it's something I can't even pronounce. So you have all the narratives changing. And one of the things they said in those narratives, there is no evidence that this is extraterrestrial. Fitzpatrick said right in front of the senators, well, I got no evidence that there's extraterrestrial involved with this.
But you'll get somebody on the record to say, we can't explain this. You'll get somebody on the record to say, this is a phenomenon we need to study some more. We need more money, more funding
money.
to do this.
And security, national security, stuff like
Always
that.
throw that word in. Absolutely.
Commander, I have
Chris has said that he's had a problem with Grouch from day one. Now, I have to basically totally agree with that, because Grouch came forward, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth. So help me, I'm going to tell the truth. And then everything he relayed was second and third hand information that he was told. No firsthand information whatsoever. Now, my question is this: where in God's name are those people that told him this stuff? Okay, granted, they'd have to go to a closed hearing. Apparently, Congress, behind closed doors, are authorized to hear a lot of this stuff, but nobody is screaming for the principles to be brought forward. Gentlemen, why?
Because I think the objective, Decker, was met by having this bread and circus routine that went on. Now, I don't know Mr. Grouch. I don't have a feeling one way or the other about him. He gave me the impression of someone that was sincere in wanting to try to relay what he thinks he knows or has concluded. But the whole goal was not to have that follow-on. And again, Martin, please forgive me as I use this example. We don't have a clear understanding what the frig is going on with the Ukrainian-Russian war that we are deeply embroiled in. And we know that the closed-door secure hearings, you hear little reactions from the congressional leadership. And when I say Congress, I'm talking about both parts, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So it doesn't surprise me that we get this. And I go back to what I believe is the basis for most of those kinds of reveals that go on, is to study what the reaction of people are. How long was it in social media? How long is it being discussed? And then different groups latch onto that to use it as a means to control conversation, to drive opinion, to ultimately go. I mean, again, I'm not going to single anybody out by name, but some of the dumbest remarks that were made on the F-35B were by sitting members of Congress. They were absolutely out there stupid remarks going on with this. Quite honestly, Chris, do you want to spend the money we're spending on an airplane that can easily be found? I don't. If it's a stealth airplane, I don't want it to be found. Not at the prices we're paying for this.
Yeah, but at least I want us to find it.
No, I don't want to know. I want it to be hard to be found.
I don't want the Chinese to find it. I can tell you that. I mean, let's face it. We gotta have some way of
the farcical part of this.
I don't want somebody calling the Pentagon saying, "Hey, there's something crashed in my backyard without us knowing."
I'm more comfortable with that after spending 110 million on that airplane. Okay, that it can't be easily found, and that the reasons that stuff on it weren't working was because they were in the mode to show that it was flying in a stealth mode. Okay. That's the part that didn't make any sense to me. If it showed right up, you know what the argument would have been? We just spent $110 million. This airplane went down and they immediately found it. What the hell's going on? You can't, I mean, this is the ridiculousness of this world that we're in. And that's why I love doing a show like this with you guys, because I want these angles to come out, because I want people to critically think. If there's 3 other people on this planet, and including Skywatcher, the 4th, are critical thinkers. You don't buy it when it comes out. You can tell me, hey, I empathetically feel for this. I agree with this. But you'll critically think about it. So
this is a true story. Last night, I cooked dinner for my wife
Martin.
and I.
True stories from last night.
We had linguine and pesto with sun-dried tomatoes. Okay, delicious dinner, really was.
And
but while I was cooking it, and the linguine got real soft and squishy, and oh man, I had garlic in there. I had olive oil. Truly was delicious. Bottom line, you know what came to my mind? I swear to God, this is the truth. I thought of the U.S. Congress while I was stirring that linguine. Now, see if you make the connection.
Well, I want to get back to Grush a little bit, because Commander hit a couple of things there that I want to touch on. One, I think Grush is a patriot. Let's face it, there have been a lot of credible people who said this guy is a patriot. He's a really good guy. What do patriots do? Patriots will say, if somebody in the Pentagon or somebody approaches and says, listen, we need you to put this narrative out. You're in the right place at the right time. We want you to put this out there. Do this for us, and stuff. He's not going to say no. This guy is a military guy, and he's a patriot, and he's a good guy. But here's the one thing, and that whole thing that he said that frightened me. And I'll tell you why it frightened me, because Congress didn't jump up and go, what? He says that people probably have been killed over this UFO subject. I went, holy shit. If they have silenced people, which we all have a suspicion of, but I mean, this guy is coming out to Congress. Not one of those congressmen said, say that again? You're telling me that you have information that American people have been killed over this subject, murdered? That should have been stopped right there.
Well, you see, most people today are unaware that in the immediate aftermath of the Roswell event, whatever that event was, okay, 3 things happened in quick succession within the next 6 to 8 to 10 weeks. Number 1, the National Security Act was signed into law. Now, even at the height of World War II and the Manhattan Project, the most top secret project ever up to that point, the design, development, and ultimate deployment of the atomic bomb. Okay, we didn't have a National Security Act. The Central Intelligence Agency was brought into its existence. All right, and the United States Army Air Force was separated from the Army and became its own independent military entity. Now, the thing that's most astounding to me is, number 1, the National Security Act, which means under the guise of national security, up to and including premeditated murder may legally be carried out in the event it is determined to be a threat to national security. Most people are totally unaware of that. And by God, it's about time they wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah, I agree. Martin, you heard that there. I mean, they're talking about murder over a UFO phenomenon.
Right. Yeah, I do remember that it was kind of shocking to hear that. And as far as, I think about this, since we're on the topic of basically the hearings and Grush and all that, people are out there saying now, maybe it's all misinformation. He was fed misinformation, which is possible, of course, but at what end? Why? I always try to think, why could this be happening if it's truly happening? What is the motive, and how could it be orchestrated that 40 different people told him these different things? And
Martin, I got to follow up on what you just said.
Yeah, all right.
Two things. Number 1, why, gentlemen, do you think UFOs, UAPs, or whatever the glitzy term that we're next week will come up? I have to change the chyron for the name of the show, I guess, on a weekly or monthly basis, depending on whatever is in. We should crowdsource that. What do you want to call the show? Crossfire what? That's one thing we should be doing. The second, why do you think that's any different than any other endeavor that we're going on? I mean, what Don has not alluded to, directly points to, is correct. That is part of what's there. The second worst piece of legislation, in my opinion, was the Patriots Act. When that crap came out, I was practically on the end of the pointy stick because I was in uniform when that came out, and I was talking about how much crap this is. This is so anti-U.S. Constitution, anti-First Amendment. What is going on here? You know, but you made a remark, and Don talked about it during the Manhattan Project. When they were picking the flight crews to fly little man, fat man and little boy, Tibbetts group, they brought them out to a base in Ohio where it has been alluded that many extraterrestrial biologicals, I don't want to offend Don any further with the not keeping with the current terminology, where, and when they had them coming across a flight line, they left the hangar door open, very little crack in the hangar door, and they had to walk across this ramp and go into another room. They knew they were getting briefed and they were being screened to see if they could cover. Their flying credentials were fantastic, and in it was the mock-up of an airplane with no propeller, pointy nose, swept wings, all kinds of stuff. And it was in the back, and you know you're not supposed to see it. And of course, these guys, being the types of people that they are, looked in there. And then they tracked the people that had seen it. And they actually went after one guy because during confession, they found out that in the confessional for a Roman Catholic, he had made mention to the priest who had told him in the confessional how concerned he was about how the war was going. Will we win? Will we prevail over evil? This very human one-to-one exchange going under a so-called protected religious right. Okay. So you figure out how they knew this conversation went on, because they approached this guy and they want to know, what were you thinking when you tried to assuage the fears of your priest in the confessional by telling them about the thing that you had seen? It was staged. They wanted to see how far they would go with viewing this thing, knowing that they were pilots, knowing that they were air crew. Because what he told the priest was, don't worry, we have the technology. We're going to beat the Nazis. We're going to beat the Japanese. We are building planes and technology. Now, I don't know how hard you guys are going to judge that kind of disclosure to a priest in a confessional about something that you had seen. I don't know how far you see that as a violation. I'm setting aside that. I'm talking, look at the mechanism that was set up intentionally to try to figure out if you had a security leak or what the loyalty factor of this was. These weren't people that hadn't demonstrated their skills and their bravery in the face of combat. Nobody just walked into this particular mission. This was the high-end delivery of probably one of the biggest things that had gone on in World War II. And this was the kinds of ways that I think, very well-intentioned as it may have been, the security apparatus was looking at.
Did they kill him?
No. As far as we know.
See, but Grush is saying they killed people over UFO technology.
But it's not because of UFOs that they're being killed. If it's happening, they are being killed because they are violating some portion of what has been discovered, what has been engineered, what is going on. But this is not, and all joking aside, this is not exclusive to this particular area of discussion. This is going on over what I consider a lot less, much more pedestrian issues are going on.
I guess my issue is that when you say it in a public forum in a congressional hearing over UFOs,
and there's not a big reaction.
You barely get a result from these
right.
guys.
And here's the point that I guess I'm not making well with you, Chris. It's not the fact that people didn't react to it. It's the fact that it takes a group of us to have the discussion about where is the outrage.
Agree.
That's the part that has got my dearth about this. Because if you work backwards from this, there have been events, UFO, UAP, whatever the term, events that have gone on that the government has made as equal a stupid, insulting, on its face argument. And as going back to what Decker brought up earlier, at what point do you say enough? And at what point do we demand it? Well, I'm rapidly coming to the conclusion that we are approaching the point that when we do get to the point that we are going to make the demand, we're not going to be allowed to go very far with the demand.
I want to ask Martin's feelings on this. Martin, you were there. I mean, when that was brought up, what did you think? What was in your mind?
It's the whole day. There was so many things brought up. That did stand out as the couple of things that stood out that day was that in particular, and then also when he was asked about the biologicals found in the craft, and he kind of said very broadly non-human. Now that again, he's not a first-hand witness, and to address that also, I do believe that right away when that article came out, I'm trying to remember, it's a German last name. This young kid came out with an article talking about Grush's, problems with alcohol and, PTSD or whatever. When he went right away, when that first came out, I thought, well, that's one way to cure someone that might come out as a firsthand witness is to, push this out there, the dirty laundry out there to discourage anyone else thinking about coming forward.
Martin, perfect. I just got to grab one thing you just said there. Perfect statement you just made. We just went through 20 plus years of war without end. Goes, feeds to the whole discussion we had. PTSD has gone from something that we, didn't want to talk about to now as one of the most recognizable mental, not condition. I'm not using the right word, but a mental situation that people are rapidly saying, "Hey, look, we've got to be supportive of this." I mean, you get PTSD now for at all levels of activity going on.
Getting your ass chewed out by your supervisor at work.
Or Don Ecker yelling at you at Crossfire UAP. Does KGRA have the facilities that I'm going to need at the end of this show? I don't know.
I'm going to need
point, though, Martin, I'm making on this, the timing of this, I actually would feel I would have been more concerned if you didn't see something like that, because it's scripted. It is part of the playbook. It is to throw doubt in there. Folks like us that have a belief, folks like us that are convinced, that are searching for more evidence, we're not going to be thwarted by this. We'll apply critical analysis to the things that are said, what we would have preferred to have heard, how it's going to go. But what about that bigger group in the middle who's now worried about, as Don was talking, gas prices or the war in Ukraine or whatever's going on? If a couple days later comes out that this person is no longer a reliable witness because we've just found this out, well, that's ridiculous.
Well, let's not forget what they did. Okay, in the immediate aftermath of Grush's testimony, someone then floated the idea that Grush might have mental problems.
Sure.
He's on the autism scale, perhaps, and he had to go see a shrink at one. They tried to tear the guy down. Somebody did.
And that convinces me that he has something valid to say. When I see that kind of behavior, that tells me somebody is on to something. What it is, not within the scope of the few minutes we have left. But that playbook, that it's getting old, it's tripe, in my reaction to it, but I do look for that in a very strange way as affirmation that he was onto something. And the fact that it wasn't presented in a more legal way of presenting that information, where you didn't have congressmen asking about the situation in the back. They're briefed on this person's background. So now you're telling me the people that are asking these questions don't know that his background, don't know these questions, and then you wait for it to come out later. Now that's the suspect part to me.
Yeah.
That's the part that doesn't add up to me. In this day and age, you're telling me this is all, and then somebody with a German last name is the one that puts the story out online.
And Commander, don't you think he knows this too? I mean, if
of course he does.
He says, "Hey, wait a minute, I got a drinking problem. I got a little bit of autism. I got this. I got that kind of in my background."
Again, if he has autism, okay, if he does or he doesn't, and God, if this show at the end of it, I don't look like I'm the poster child for this stuff, okay, but if that's the truth, he's highly functioning. Look where he's been and what he's done.
It's more like an Asperger's type of situation.
It would have been an enhancement, but it was the cheap shot at the end of it. And quite honestly, I look for that now as a means to tell me that the person's hitting kind of close to home, that they're onto something.
Interesting.
I still think that part of it is like you said, a playbook. They said he knew that this was going to come out after he testified.
Well, he actually talked about his issues with that cold heart interview, but they didn't release all of it. So, but he did openly admit these problems.
There you go.
So anyway, I don't know how much time we have left, but Commander, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump all the way back to the Tic Tac.
You bet. And
just with a question is, if you do believe it's a possibility that these things were American-made, technology, a couple of things. First of all, would you consider the drop that they witnessed on the radar? I mean, could anything American-made that we know of at this point stay together without falling apart with the G-force? And secondly, why would they if they knew there was an exercise going on in that area, do you think that they staged this purposely to see the reaction? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes. Okay. First part, if you're using the kinds of technology that we're familiar with and comfortable with, if you're viewing it from your time on an airliner to thinking, how could you possibly have this go? This is not an aerospace vehicle in the sense that it's bending aerodynamics or bending air. It's something else is happening. How do I think that occurs? I have my private kind of guesses of what it is. But if you have the kind of power source to pull this off, and if you have the kind of power source that allows you to, in my mind, the reason you would use an occupant is because it has less of a tail of other things that have to happen, because it didn't fly autonomously. It really, to me, flew and reacted and interacted what was going on with it on that. So that's why I think if you have that power source, then you have other means to do it. The human body can take a lot of G's. They just have to be in a certain direction, and you will not. I mean, you'll feel physical discomfort, but you won't pass out. You won't be irreparably harmed. There are, of course, other times when you make impacts that doesn't work. So the ability for it to do that and to do that, yes, I have seen aircraft that are so far advanced in the scope of the timeline of what I'm familiar with that do things that are just absolutely incredible on that. I can easily extrapolate that. But here's the question, how I answer your second part of that, Martin. If we have competing programs with other countries that we don't like, what's the easiest way to make a statement to show that we have gotten a couple more steps down the path to feeling or to having the capability? How do we convince them? Running that as an exercise, running that against a Navy carrier battle group, its physical location to where it was to the southwestern part of the United States, it all conveniently fits to me.
Well, you know, I saw an East Coast battle group aviator.
Yep, same thing.
All right, where one of these devices blew between him and his wingman.
Are you saying they
Okay.
copied Top Gun Maverick?
I guess.
I'm very uncomfortable with that, Don. I'm very uncomfortable with that.
But this aviator was saying, hey, if they're ours, man, why would they be doing that where we're flying at? I mean, Commander, they went boom right between him and his wingman, scared hell out of them. Okay. And I was thinking, boy, if anybody would have twitched when they should have twatched, somebody would have been splattered all over that tic tac, you know?
Unless that you have a technology that allows you to do that. And that's the other part that tells me that there's very human occupation going on in there. That maneuver sounds so much like a human pilot activating that kind of capability, knowing because of how it maybe projects a barrier around it that would cause the aircraft to tumble away. I mean, I could give you countless examples in my mind that I can conjure up. I'm focusing on what I consider to be very interesting behavior of how these show up, where they showed up, where they would be close to, the facilities that would allow protection of it. AUTEC in the southeast, the whole complex that's in the southwest part of the United States. So,
well, gentlemen, we are now under 1 minute left in this show. I guess this is the point where we're going to have to shut this fascinating discussion off. But guys, I really look forward to future programs with the four of you. Bill would be the fourth.
The puppet master in the background pulling the strings in chat.
Exactly.
No, I have two personalities going, so you know.
Oh, death. Yeah. Oh, braggart.
Yeah.
Next week, next time we get together, you're going to be autistic too. Thanks. Great. Fine. Take away from me.
Yeah, and I got PTSD, Commander. So there you go. Hey, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back with more each week. Keep your eyes pointed up and have a great week.